Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to Ancestry Roads. And we've got a new special web series that we're going to do this year. Here at Ancestry Roads, we are getting ready to plant. We're thinking about what we're going to plant: flowers, veggies, other things that we're going to plant, maybe things we're going to take down. And we've invited Rosann with us to do a whole web series all year long. Let's get started. Hi, Rosann. Welcome. And I am so thrilled that Rosann of Moon and Mountain Lore will be starting this web series, Planting by the Signs, with us every month. So welcome.
I'm glad to be here, Sandy. Thank you.
I really love this. Now, Rosann, you have a copy of the calendar, I think, handy. Yes. If you've grown up in Appalachia, I guarantee you, your mama, your grandma, however you talk, your Grammy had a calendar that looked like this. It was a red and white calendar, and I guarantee you that there was one hanging in the kitchen. Usually, my grandmother always had hers by the back door in the kitchen. And for decades, I have gone by this calendar and not really paid attention to it. And when she would go to the calendar and she would look at it and point and just go, kind of like this and think, I thought, okay, she's thinking about an appointment, or she's thinking about what day it is, or how many days left in a month, whatever it might be. No, she was thinking about planting and when she can plant, when she can rip out, and when she can't. This is going to be a whole year's worth of series where Rosann is going to come back every month and tell us what to do, when we can do it, and how we can do it. Because in Appalachia, we plant by the signs. So welcome, Rosann. What would you like to start? This is going to be an intro for us.
Sure. I think I'd like to start by giving a shout out to the elders in North Georgia and part of North Carolina, where I really learned this. I did not grow up planting by the signs. My grandfather did not plant by the signs. He said he didn't live on the moon. He lived on the earth. He wanted to be educated. He was not. He wanted to be a scientist. He was not. So anything that sounded folklorish to him, he was not going to do it. So I learned to plant by the signs in North Georgia, in Dahlonega. And my garden was 4 blocks from the middle of Dahlonega, and people would shout out advice to me. Like, if you plant them taters when the science is in the bowels, they ain't going to do nothing. And I would say, thank you, sir. And I would be like,
keep moving, sir.
And of course, we got little, as my mother said, nubbins, little tiny things. And another elder said, well, you also can't plant potatoes when signs are in the feet. I had no idea what they were talking about. And my students were going out and gathering heirloom seeds, my students at the University of North Georgia, and interviewing elders about these seeds. And of course, they got the almanac lesson and the calendar lesson. So after 5 years of this, we said, we're going to study planting by the signs. And we started trying to find books on that. And we went to the librarian and tried to do JSTOR on that. And no, it's not there. With the exception of the Foxfire books, which were done in North Georgia, started many years ago, we couldn't find anything. So we had to do the way Appalachians have always done it. The elders came into our classroom and taught us. And
that's so great.
Yeah, we went into their gardens and homes and to the farmers markets. And so what I would like the audience to know is that the way I learned it may not be the way it's practiced in West Virginia or Pennsylvania or anywhere else up and down the spine of Appalachia.
And we should make note that we are an Appalachia Stories channel. So we are focusing on Appalachia. Both Rosann and I are based in North Georgia as well. So a lot of our experience comes from North Georgia. My side, and Rosann also comes from North Carolina. My experience comes from North Georgia and West Virginia. Appalachia does go up to Pennsylvania and New York. And so if we have anybody in the audience watching live or watching after the fact, drop us a comment, drop us a note if you do something different, if you call it different, because we're all learning here. And we would love to know what you do in your area of Appalachia. And I think we should also mention that this is not practiced only in Appalachia.
Absolutely.
It's worldwide.
And it's in many other rural areas. It's in urban areas as well. They may not call it planting by the signs. Sometimes you might see the idea pop up in biodynamic agriculture or permaculture, but that is a way more complicated system. I would love to speak with some Germans, because you guys are one of the motherships of this. So yeah, it's not just Appalachia, but what we're going to be talking about is how this folk practice has been passed on. I was lucky enough to see archives from 50 years ago from Foxfire, and people were interviewed, and the mountain students that wrote down what these folks said, they wrote it in the mountain dialect. And so that's how we were able to compare what I was learning from the elders in my classroom and what was said 50 years ago. So that's kind of the outline of what of the practice itself. But Sandy, will you tell me what will you tell the audience when you were first learning about it and you said, well, I know what to do when it's in my sign, but I love that story.
I know. This was really funny because when Rosann and I have talked many times about Appalachia in general, and then when she came on to the show, talk about planting by the signs last year. So I recommend everybody go back and watch that show as well. This is going to be a little different because we're talking month to month, and she gave a really detailed outline of what it was last year on Ancestry Roads. But the first thing I did is say, well, I know my sign is Taurus, so I don't get it. When my Taurus is on different days, or the bull's on different days of this calendar. It says some days I can plant and some days I can't, but most days I don't understand when Taurus is supposed to do it. My husband's Leo. When's he supposed to do it? We live in the same house. We have the same garden. What's going on here? So I think it is important that you mentioned this is not based on your sign.
Yes. And that's why I called it planting by the what? Because
Yeah.
that's exactly what I thought about it. Planting by the what kind of signs?
Yeah.
And I learned it was zodiac signs, but it was the zodiac sign that the moon is in. It has nothing to do with your natal placements. It has nothing to do with hello, baby, what's your sign?
Don't bother going to the newspaper to look for your horoscope. We're not talking about that either. Just throw all that away.
And that's what these calendars tell us is, and it's in a code, and then we'll get to a little bit how to decode that. But it is all about the two factors: what is the moon doing, and what sign is the moon in. And the other thing that I learned along the way that I'd also like our audience to know is it's not just planting. It is anything you do in a garden. It's certainly when do you sow, but also when do you reap? When do you harvest? What should the moon be waxing, and what sign should the moon be in? And it's not even just about gardening. It's about anything you would do in the farm. When do you trim your animal's hooves?
Mm-hmm.
When do you trim other parts of the animal that farmers would have to trim? And it's about people too. Our elders told us we did everything by the signs. We got our hair cut by the signs. We went to the dentist by the signs. And it wasn't uncommon in North Georgia to hear from the dentist, well, I've got a cancellation, but the signs are in the head, and so I don't guess you want to come either. So, And there were phrases like, well, don't go to the dentist then because you'll bleed like a stuck pig. So it wasn't just about people. It was about activities such as cooking and cutting wood. And when do you cut wood? When do you prune? If you prune a
Mhm.
trio when the sign, if you prune a tree when the signs are in the heart, you're going to kill it. So it really is. It was possible for our ancestors to live by the signs, to plan every area of life by the signs. It is not science. It is folk practice.
Yeah,
And
I
so,
think that's important to note, and I'm glad you say that too,
yeah,
because we could take this and maybe compare it somehow to science, but folk people did not really do that.
mm-mm.
So we're not going to do that as well. We're going to keep with our traditions that we have from Appalachia, from our own grandparents, for example, from mine, in generations back. And when I talk about just my grandmother doing this goes back further than her. This isn't just me, my mother, and my grandmother. This goes pretty far back, doesn't it, Rosann?
Yes, and I spent about a couple of years trying to track it back, the ancestry of planting by the signs, and I finally gave up because you get back to Pliny the Elder, and okay, well that's far enough for
Yeah.
me. You can see it in many cultures all over the world, and not just a Western civilization, but also coming out of South America, coming out of New Zealand, some of the indigenous planting traditions there. So it's a really, really, really deep culture. It's
It's
not,
fascinating. Yeah, it's fascinating how every culture has taken the basis and
yes.
then for their location of the world or their culture modified it. So this is really great. Okay, so where should we start?
So let's start by getting a basic definition. I think it's on that handout. Planting by
Okay,
the
let's
what? Planting by the signs. What in the world is that? How I've come to understand it, and I certainly welcome comments on this definition, but it is a folk practice that uses the phases of the moon and the signs of the zodiac to determine what to do in your home and in your garden and in your life. So it is a folk practice. I can't stress that enough, that it is not science. It is so elegant, though. It is astrology. It is not astronomy. However, people who practice this would never say, "Oh, this is just an electional astrology." No, 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 no. They would not use the word zodiac. They do not use
Yeah.
the word zodiac. And so if you can see this guy, this naked man standing up there, he is called a man of many signs. He's been around since the first woodcuts in the Middle Ages when printing was getting started. And he is the key to decoding your calendar because your calendar will not say that the moon is in Leo. Your calendar will have an icon of a lion, or it will say the heart. And so how do you go from Leo, lion, the heart? And this guy, he's the key to it. Because in the Middle Ages, doctors were, if they wanted to bleed people, they had to find out what part they were going to bleed them in by looking to see when the signs were right. So that is part of that tradition. And it fascinates me that Appalachia has a remnant of a tradition that we can literally trace. So if you can see this guy at the very top, there's a ram and Aries and the head. So each icon is connected to a body part, which stands for Aries, Taurus, Aries. I can't even, I should know this. Aries, what is it? Taurus, Gemini, all the way around through all 12 signs of the zodiac. So when an Appalachian person might say, don't plant potatoes when the signs are in the feet, because you won't get anything but nubbins. That means don't plant potatoes in Pisces, because if you look at the bottom, you'll see the man's feet, and you'll see he's standing on fish, and you'll see that he is, and that's the connection. Sometimes you hear, if you can't do anything else, plant under the sign of the crab.
That's what my husband does. He always looks at he looks at the calendar more than I do. And the crab is his friend.
Yes. You can think of the crab as the number one, the crab meaning Cancer. The crab or the breast. Sometimes you'll see, if you can't do anything else, plant, and someone will, kind of pat their heart around their breast area. And your worst enemy when it comes to planting is the killing sign of Leo.
And he knows that one well.
Yes. And so the killing signs that Foxfire folks and elders in North Georgia referred to were Aries and Leo, or the head and the heart. And so, if you can imagine that there was a time that you had to cut wood for everything. If you were going to make an instrument, that was a very different way that you wanted your wood to function than if you were cutting wood for your stove. And if you were cutting wood for your stove, that was very different. Maybe you were baking and you wanted long, slow wood, a long, slow burn. It was very different from a hot, roaring fire in your fireplace. So there's the deep tradition related to this, just around when to cut wood for what. And so
we did, as Appalachians, we use wood in so many different ways that most people would just think you're cutting down a tree just because you want the tree cut down, or you're cutting down the tree because you do need a fire. And that's not, necessarily so. It just to backtrack just a little bit at Leo, we have a patch of poison ivy that comes up guaranteed every year. And I mean, everything my husband's tried to get rid of it, comes up every year. This year, he did it with Leo, did not come back up. I don't know what it happened. I don't understand it, but he decided to try it and it did not come back up.
And, maybe that's confirmation bias, but like the elders are always telling me, and now that I'm an elder, I can tell you, well, try it for yourself and find out.
Yeah.
Plant some seeds in Cancer and plant some seeds in Leo, or, plant in the breast and then plant in the heart and see what happens. Have a good sign, bad sign, little field test trial in your garden.
And I will say too that Rosann has, and that's down below in the description, and awesome Instagram, that she puts cards up every week, I believe, right? And you tell us what we can do, what we can't do. It's fabulous, because there was one time last year, again, we were, removing a couple bushes actually, and I remember so boldly you were like, if you want to get rid of that bush or that brush, now's the time. This week is the time. So we got out there and we did it. Not that we thought it'd grow back or anything, but we just trusted in the signs, planted by the signs, and trust.
It is, again, I'll say, it's such an elegant, beautiful system of ordering your life. And that's what I appreciate it. That's what I appreciate about it. When my students and I started studying it, we would ask, we would say, wow, why are they saying zodiac? I mean, a lot of the folks we interviewed were conservative, or on the conservative side, and Protestant, people who went to church and truly had a deep faith. But what we found out is we were asking the wrong question, because it had nothing to do with that. In our community members' mind, they saw it as, well, yeah, it's right there in the Bible. A time to plant, a time to sow. God made the stars. God made the moon. Well, it's what He make them for. If it wasn't to order our life, so it was a part and parcel of a faith system, which you could argue in a way that it's also a folk practice, and that's certainly not to offend anybody. But our beliefs are so deep. We talk about in Appalachia, there's surface culture come to Dahlonega, Georgia, and you could see all kind of things. You could go gold mining. You could have some good funnel cakes and a festival. You could listen to some wonderful old time music.
Yeah.
And that's surface culture. That's anything that a tourist or a mover inner could experience. But what I'm speaking here is deep culture. This is culture that is not available at the universities. It's not going to be on your tourist guide. It is what you have to live there, not just be from there, but be of that place. And sometimes the culture is so deep that those living it don't even know that it's part of their deep culture. It's like the fish in the sea.
They're so used to the doing what they do. They've learned it, and it's just something that's the way that my mom did from my grandmother, and so on. But we moved, as I've talked about many times, I was the first of the hillbilly highway generation. So these planting by the signs kind of left us as Appalachians as we moved out. But now we're coming back to these type of things. We're coming back to the old ways and ways that we've learned. And that's what I love, that you're going to be here every month with us to kind of guide us and tell us what to do, when to do it, how to do it. So if you're planting your garden right now, if you're planting flower garden, trees, bushes, your large vegetable garden, and who doesn't want a tomato garden, right? So this is the intro of how to understand the calendar, and Rosann's going to tell us how to get the calendar as well. But this is the intro of how to use the calendar. It's so simple. It looks complicated, but it's not. It's so simple. And then when to plant. And then she's also going to come back and answer any questions that we might have
There you go.
as we go along too.
Yeah, and the bottom part of this handout, it really tells you the 2 steps. So you have your decoder at the top, and instead of saying the name of the zodiac sign, you're going to look for the body part or the icon of the animal or the scales or whatever the icon stands for. But really, you want to look for 2 things. You want to look for what phase is the moon in. And what sign is it in? So we'll take the first one. What phase is the moon? And in planting by the signs, they're really they're 4 phases, but you can really break them down to 2 to keep it really simple. You can say, I'm going to plant above ground crops, meaning if I eat the part that grows above ground, I'm going to plant those when the moon is waxing, when it is appearing to get bigger.
So we're talking tomatoes, corn, beans,
yes,
bell peppers, melons. Melons are that's still above ground?
Yes. And if you eat the part that's above ground,
okay.
Or if you use the part that's above ground, if you're planting flower seeds and it's gonna, it's not going to come back. You're going to enjoy that beautiful part that's above ground. But if you're planting bulbs, and we'll move to the second part, if you eat or enjoy that which is below the ground, then you plant when the moon is waning or appearing to get smaller. In other words, from the full moon to the new moon.
And we're talking potatoes. We're talking turnips,
Beets.
Beets. Oh yeah, beets. Garlic, I guess too, would be in there as well.
And so some people just stop right there. They don't even move into the signs. I was speaking with this woman from West Virginia. She said, "Oh, honey, I just go out and look at the moon
and see."
Yeah, that's all I can do. So it really is 2 different systems that over the centuries have come together. So above ground crops, above when the moon is waxing, below ground crops when the moon is waning. The second part of the system is the one that's a little more complicated. It certainly was for us. And that second part is what zodiac sign is that moon in? And so there are 12 of them, right? And you don't want to have to memorize all 12 signs. Well, the trick is to look for, if you're planting and you want something to flourish, you've already decided if you're going to plant it, when the moon is waxing or waning, you just want to go find a fruitful sign. There's only a handful of them. My top signs are Cancer. They're watery signs, that my calendar calls them. Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. You might hear them called the breast, the loins, and the feet. Those are your prize signs. Another A student in this pantheon is Taurus. Taurus the bull, strong as a bull. I've heard it said over and over again. If you want to plant corn that's resistant to drought, and we could all use that.
Yeah.
I know I could down here in Georgia. You plant it in the sign of Cancer, or because Cancer is the water. It's watery of the waterist. What you don't do when it comes to just planting is you don't plant in barren signs. So you can think of signs in two groups. They're fruitful signs, or some people say fertile signs. It's just the same. Or they're barren signs. They're signs that just don't do so great. Some people might call them so-so signs. And out of those barren signs, there's some killing signs. And that's where the heart and the head, that is.
Isn't that the case in real life? Sorry, I had to put that in. Isn't that the case? The heart and the head messes up all the time.
That's the dang truth. Isn't that the truth? I mean. So there are a lot of other signs that we've got barren signs like Aquarius and Gemini. And there's always exceptions, just like when you're learning English. Well, the exception. And yeah, there's some exceptions. And each month we'll try to get into a tiny little exception so you can understand better, because like any other folk system, it has these intricacies. Mm-hmm. And that's where I hope you'll write and say, oh no, Aries, we didn't call Aries a killing sign. Leo's the killing sign. Yeah. So again, when you pull those two together, let's say we're planting carrots. We want to look for a time that the moon is waning, and we want to look for a fruitful sign. Now, there was that exception. Pisces, the fishes, the feet, they're certainly fruitful, but that's when I learned that exception of your potatoes will come out looking really, really, really tiny. Your 2-year-old godchild can play with them like little balls. So the bottom part of this page is really important. And Sandy, on the next couple of pages, I have broken out some more information on the signs, according to how fertile they are. So they're really fertile and they're really barren. And you can see on this axis, you can see this going from Cancer, that's really fertile, to Leo, which is really killing. And there's a good astrological basis for that. And another time we can talk about that. I just find it fascinating how this system got passed down with remnants of, you can listen to a History of Science podcast, and all of a sudden they're talking about planting by the signs. They're making say I'm planting by the signs, but they are using these words. That every sign is good for something, I've learned. Especially when it comes to harvest. And we'll be talking this probably from July through November.
We start harvesting everything we have.
Yeah.
And I think you're right when you say that every sign is good for something. So when you think, don't plant during Leo is a killing sign, that might be true that you don't want to plant, but that doesn't mean you can't remove things you want removed from your garden. So that's a positive. Don't always think that when we say it's a killing sign, that's a negative. That's actually a positive for things that you might want to remove and not come back from your garden. And the thing that I find very interesting about this is my grandmother and my mother, I mean, we were banned from reading our horoscopes. That was not a thing that was allowed in my house. And so that's why when I approached Rosann with this, and I go, well, you know, my husband is Leo and I'm Taurus. So I don't get it. We're opposite here. One's a good sign, one's a bad sign, same yard. But I learned to also, even though you're not supposed to go by the zodiac, I've learned to remember these signs based on people in my house. Like my son is a Libra. So that's how I kind of remember when's a good thing and when's a bad thing as well. Even though we say this isn't about the zodiac, that was like my little cheat sheet. Or you could be like my husband, just look at the calendar every day.
Yeah, or you could be like the woman from West Virginia, what's her name? 𝗵𝗿𝗰𝗁𝗃. That if she just says can't do anything else, plant in the sign of crab. Plant, you know, if you can't do anything else, and don't plant in a killing sign. So she's restricted the system to just planting, and the best sign, the worst sign. So however you can conceptualize it, I just encourage you to start looking at this calendar. My calendar comes, so the one that I was taught on, great calendars out there. Mine comes from the American Calendar Company out of Greenville, Tennessee. I got to tour that little place, and I love that it's an Appalachian family-run business. I don't get anything for telling you that, but that's the calendar I prefer. However, some of our seed keepers really loved their almanac, and there would be disagreements on which almanac to use. And some of them appeared our classroom with their almanac saying you're teaching those youngins how to use the wrong almanac. So even within a certain place, and with this system that's passed down, people still argue and debate. So I hope that this introduction will help you to not just look at that calendar like I did the first time and roll your eyes, but just try to understand that think of the stained glass windows in churches. Those told stories, and they told stories for a reason, because no one could read. And so they're symbolic. And so this is a symbolic system to ordering your life. And you can take it down to just planting or the whole thing. It could be like my friend who drives from Dahlonega to Hanging Dog, North Carolina, because she wants her cut, and she has to have that when the moon is increasing and when it's in Libra. Libra is for beauty. So yeah. Sandy.
This is a calendar we're talking about. This one is a very, very, very old one from a photographer acquaintance, and he has amazing photographs. And I stumbled upon this. He was actually photographing an abandoned mill in Maryland. And as soon as I saw it, I instantly contacted Rosann. I said, look at this very, very cool calendar. This is what it looked like in a little bit older times. You can see the red text under the numbers, like under 14, but then like 15th of the month, you can see it has an animal place. So to me, this calendar from 1957 shows that people were using this constantly and didn't really need to be taught it. And I'll see if I can bring up the other one real quick. So you can see that the calendar that Rosann had mentioned that she likes, and this is just going to show not quite everything, but you can see the difference in the calendar, where now under the numbers of the dates, there's the signs of the moon, a lot more text, but those little blobs that you see there too are like the crab or Pisces. You know, it says the head and the thighs, and it gives you an idea of what to look for that Rosann just gave us in that decoder. So the calendars of modern day look a little bit more like this, and this is actually from my wall. I might say that this is our calendar that we used, I believe, last year. So when the day comes, usually if we know the weekend's going to be nice coming up, we'll look and see, is this a weekend that we're going to remove some brush from our yard and some trees? We did actually have like 10 trees removed from our yard, and my husband did look at the calendar and scheduled those trees. Yes. No reason, just because the calendar told him to. You know, he doesn't know. He didn't have any reason. He just, calendar tells me to. Why not? And he was the one who planted all our tomatoes last year. I did not plant them. He did, and he waited. And he was out there kind of in the rain too, doing it because he didn't want to miss that. It's right before the moon that is the
Yes.
most, you know.
Yes. You can look for the most fruitful sign right before that full moon.
Oh, the pic's not showing. That's a shame.
Yeah. So, I look forward to coming back next month, and we'll actually look at the calendar, and I'll give you some tips on what is the first. When you look at this calendar, it can look so confusing. Well, what's the first thing that you look for? And it's pretty simple. You look for the all black circle. That's the new moon. And then you look for the clear white circle. That's the full moon. And then we go from there. So meanwhile, check out the Instagram or Facebook. And that's where the highlights. Some people don't want to know all these details. They just want to know, when do I do it? And this is a good way to learn it. It takes a while to get
down below. Yeah, these links are all down below too. And I go to this weekly myself, and I will look. And for those of you that are talking about planting, for example, this is an indoor bulb. So it's not just outdoor as well. If we're going to start planting, and you also give us great detail. So, we can look and see the card, but then we can also click on it and see the more detail. What exactly are you talking about here, Rosann? And she tells us. So it's pretty cool.
So I hope everybody will give it a shot. Don't give up if it seems more complicated. One of the keys is not to pay attention to everything on that calendar. As Sandy said, they've become increasingly complex. Sunrise, moonrise, moonset. You're just looking for what is the moon waxing or waning, and is it in a fruitful or a killing sign, or a so-so sign?
Yeah, and I'll tell you that we tend to stick with Cancer. And the calendars, they are available. We have a link down below for the company that Rosann mentioned. You can get them online at some of the larger name places that we're not going to name here, but you can get them online there as well. And get started and start now, because we're getting this webcast a little late. Rosann and I were working a side project that we will not talk about because it takes a lot of our time, but a lot of you know what it is that we were busy for 72 hours doing. But we are coming back next week as well, around the 1st of February, to get February started, so you can know what to do in February. This is the intro. When we see you next, we'll talk about just February, and that's how we're going to take it each month at a time. We're going to give you what to do that month and get ready for your planning season. So get your calendar now, get ready, and we'll see you at the next webcast. Thanks.
And thank you. And go out and talk to your neighbors and ask them if they plant by the signs. And that's where you can where the learning really starts. You
really will, and see what they say. I bet you they'll be like, "Oh, yes, my grandmother," or that calendar. So they'll do it. So thanks everybody for joining us. We'll see you next month.